The U.S. Surgeon General recently declared something that it sounds almost impossible when you really think about the hyper-connected, crowded world we live in. Like, he officially declared loneliness and social isolation a public health epidemic.
Yeah, it really is a profound cultural reality right now, and honestly, it's a heartbreaking one. I mean, you can live in a densely populated suburban neighborhood, commute in bumper-to-bumper traffic, spend 40 hours a week in a bustling office building, and still feel completely, profoundly disconnected from everyone around you. Proximity simply does not equal belonging.
Right, exactly. We're physically surrounded by people, but we are starving for actual connection. And that tension, that being physically close but relationally empty, that's exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
Right, we're drawing from a recent sermon by Pastor Florin um, titled "A City Filled with People."
Yeah, which dives into what it actually takes to build a truly lived-in, connected community.
And before we get into the text, if you have a Bible handy, and we'll be referencing the NIV, but whatever version you have works perfectly, we want to invite you to pause this audio right now.
Yes, definitely pause it. We are looking at the book of Nehemiah, specifically chapter 11, verse 1, all the way through chapter 12, verse 47.
So yeah, take a moment to read that passage and then press play when you are ready to unpack it with us.
Okay, assuming you've read it, we're glad you're back. And really quickly, just to give you some context on how this audio fits into your week, this is actually the third piece of like a three-part approach at Agape Community Church.
Right. First, you have the live Sunday sermon, which is preached for the room, shaped for the gathered church and pastoral ministry.
Yeah, and then second, there's the fuller midweek video teaching on the church's YouTube channel.
Exactly, which is explored for depth. It allows you more time to slow down, pause, and take notes.
And third, you have this audio, which is designed to be discussed for apprenticeship. This is where the message is processed in your apprenticeship groups and applied in everyday obedience.
Right, three complementary expressions of one biblical message.
Oh, and a quick bit of housekeeping before we dive in. The content and development of this audio have been assisted by AI, but everything has been fully reviewed by the pastor.
Which is great.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to Nehemiah 11. We just talked about this modern epidemic of loneliness. And what is so fascinating is that thousands of years ago, Nehemiah was staring down a surprisingly similar problem.
Wait, really? Like an ancient loneliness epidemic?
Well, he had a city with perfect infrastructure, but absolutely no life.
Oh, right, yes. The wall around Jerusalem is finally rebuilt. This massive, exhausting construction project is finished. But the text explicitly notes that the city is essentially a ghost town.
Yeah, it says the city was large and spacious, but there were few people in it.
It's a striking image, honestly.
It really is. The project is done, but the purpose hasn't been realized yet.
Okay, but let's pause and really look at this because I want to make sure I understand the stakes here.
Yeah.
Initially, I'm picturing like a real estate developer who builds this gorgeous state-of-the-art subdivision.
Sure, yeah.
Beautiful gates, pristine roads, perfect landscaping, but nobody wants to move in. The houses just sit completely empty.
That's a good visual.
But it's way more intense than just a sluggish housing market, right? Like, the text says they had to cast lots, literally draw straws, just to get 1 out of every 10 people to move into their own holy city.
Yeah, they had to draft people.
Right. So why was moving there considered such a massive sacrifice?
Because, well, we have to strip away our romanticized modern view of biblical Jerusalem. We aren't talking about a thriving, wealthy metropolis here. At this specific point in history, moving to Jerusalem was incredibly dangerous.
Dangerous. How so?
It was essentially a geopolitical hostage situation. Politically, it was under the thumb of the Persian Empire. Economically, the people were being crushed by taxation and famine.
Oh, wow.
And demographically, it was shockingly small. Like, archaeological estimates suggest that the city of Jerusalem at this time may have only been about 20 to 25 dunams in size.
Wait, 25 dunams? Help me visualize that. I have no idea how big a dunam is.
Fair enough, yeah. 25 dunams is roughly the size of a couple of modern city blocks. Or think of a large shopping mall parking lot.
A mall parking lot? Are you serious?
Yeah. And the population was probably around 625 people.
Just 625 people in a space the size of a mall parking lot.
Exactly. Imagine cramming the entire cultural, political, and spiritual identity of a nation into that tiny footprint while being entirely surrounded by hostile neighboring governors who, frankly, do not want you there.
Wow. Okay, so if I'm an Israelite living out in the surrounding countryside, I have my farm, I have my extended family network, I have some level of food security.
Right, you're relatively safe.
And Nehemiah is asking me to pack up, leave my safety net, and move into a high-risk, politically tense, tiny fortress. Moving to Jerusalem wasn't a real estate upgrade. It was literally putting a target on your back.
Which, forces us to look in the mirror. When we ask what this passage reveals about human nature, our condition, and our struggles, it highlights how easily we prioritize our own comfort and safety over community.
Yeah, our default human setting is self-preservation.
Exactly. We naturally drift toward isolation when things get hard because it feels safer.
But the text points out that the leaders went first. They settled in the city to set the example, and then the people commended all the volunteers who willingly chose to follow them.
Right, they stepped up.
They didn't just agree with the idea of a restored city, they physically relocated their lives. It required what the pastor's notes call costly presence.
Costly presence, that is the exact phrase. A rebuilt wall around an empty city isn't renewal, it's just potential.
Yeah.
The wall was the project, but the people were the purpose.
And that concept of costly presence, it really hits hard when you look at the community research report for Waukesha County that Agape put together.
Oh, absolutely.
The data there shows rising isolation, aging populations, severe caregiver strain, and skyrocketing mental health struggles. Like, people all around us are feeling the weight of the world, and they are carrying it completely alone.
And that's where the ancient reality maps so directly onto our modern church experience. A church can have a beautifully restored building, flawless programming, the best lights and
It's a
sounding.
perfect wall, basically.
Right, exactly. But if the people aren't willing to step into the messy, costly reality of each other's lives, it just remains an empty subdivision. True community always requires someone to make themselves present, even when it costs them time, energy, or comfort.
But moving in is only half the battle, right? Once they actually made that commitment, once they moved in and accepted that costly presence they had to figure out how to actually live together without retreating back into their own little silos.
Right, which explains what happens next in Nehemiah chapter 12, this massive, loud dedication ceremony.
It is such a vivid, chaotic, beautiful scene. You have two massive choirs processing in opposite directions on top of these newly rebuilt walls. There are sacrifices, instruments, priests, families, women, children. The entire community is involved.
The joy was heard far away.
Yes. And here's where I need you to clarify something for me, because I get a little stuck here. The text makes it very clear that God gave them this great joy. It was a divine gift, not manufactured hype.
Sure.
But if the joy is real, shouldn't it just be spontaneous? Like, why manufacture this massive, highly orchestrated choir with specific roles like gatekeepers and directors?
That's a great question.
It feels like a modern-day marching band routing through a disaster zone just to aggressively signal that the town is back in business. Why couldn't they just have a quiet internal feeling of gratitude in their hearts?
Well, I actually love that marching band analogy because it hits on exactly what they were doing. Worship, in the biblical sense, isn't just a private, internal emotion that you keep to yourself.
Okay, so what is it?
It is a public, embodied witness to a fractured world as to why it had to be so highly orchestrated. The reality is that human joy is leaky.
Leaky. What do you mean by that?
I mean that we might have a profound moment of spiritual clarity or joy on a Sunday, but then Monday morning hits.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right. The famine is still real. The taxes are still due to the Persian king. The neighboring armies are still threatening. If you don't build intentional structures and daily rhythms to sustain that joy, it evaporates under the pressure of real life.
So they needed the structure to hold on to the joy.
Exactly. They organized the choirs and the gatekeepers because they had to order their community to keep worship central, long after the initial emotional high faded.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So it's about intentionally structuring your life around gratitude because you know your own tendency to forget.
Bingo. And this points us to something foundational about God's character.
Which is the first of our 5 foundational Bible study questions, right? What does this passage say about God?
Yes, exactly. It tells us that he is a restorer who deeply desires to dwell with his people. He isn't interested in just having impressive structures. He wants a lived-in relationship.
He wants proximity.
Right. If you trace the theological arc of the city and the temple throughout the Bible, it's all about proximity.
Right, starting all the way back in Eden.
Yes. God dwelt with humanity in the Garden of Eden, then later in the tabernacle as they wandered the wilderness, and then the temple in Jerusalem.
It's a clear pattern.
It is. But Nehemiah's rebuilt Jerusalem is just a shadow. It points forward to Jesus, who is the true temple God made flesh, moving into our neighborhood.
Wow.
And ultimately, it points to the church. The New Testament describes believers as a spirit-filled people built together into a dwelling place for God.
So the celebration is loud because their joy is declaring, with their physical bodies and their voices, that God has restored them. But if we are supposed to be this dwelling place today, what does this passage say that we need to actually believe, obey, or turn away from? That's question 3 of the study framework. Because you and I aren't literally packing up our houses and moving into a walled city in the ancient Near East.
No, we aren't. But the principle of costly presence remains identical. We need to turn away from being mere spectators of faith.
Oh, that's good.
We have to turn away from the deeply ingrained modern habit of treating the church like a consumer event we attend for an hour on Sunday, rather than a family we belong to.
So what do we need to believe?
We need to believe that God's joy is actually our strength, even in incredibly difficult seasons, and obey the call to be a costly presence in the lives of others.
And as for question 4, is there a promise, warning, or example I need to hold on to? The example is clearly those ancient leaders who moved into the vulnerable city first, right?
Absolutely. They sacrificed their personal comfort for the sake of the community.
And the warning is stark, too. Walls without people are just empty potential.
Which brings us to the most critical part of this entire discussion, really. Following Jesus isn't just about accumulating biblical knowledge or, agreeing with theological facts. It is an apprenticeship.
I want to highlight that word because the pastor emphasizes it heavily. Apprenticeship.
It is a vital distinction. Apprenticeship requires real practice, not just intellectual belief.
Right, like an electrician's apprentice doesn't just read a textbook.
Exactly. An apprentice doesn't just read a manual and call it a day. They watch the master, they imitate the master, and they arrange their daily habits around the master's way of life. It's about learning to live as Jesus would if he were in your specific place, like your job, your school, your family.
And there is a massive kingdom dimension to this discipleship, right? In Matthew 6.33, Jesus tells his followers to seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness.
That's the core priority.
Yeah, when you follow Jesus, you are adopted into a new family, a new nation, and the kingdom of God. That kingdom has a real identity, it has a heritage and a distinct culture. So everything we think, say, and do has to be built on that exact priority.
So the million-dollar question is, what does seeking that kingdom practically look like in a place like Waukesha County today? We live in a culture that is highly polarized, incredibly anxious, and quick to outrage.
Yeah, it's so easy to get sucked into culture wars. You log online and the default mode of communication is just anger.
Constant anger.
Everyone is trying to win arguments and defeat their ideological enemies.
But Agape's community action plan pushes for a completely different posture. The philosophy is conversation over confrontation.
I love that.
Yeah, instead of trying to win arguments, the goal is to be a peaceful, faithful presence in a chaotic world.
How does that actually work mechanically, though? Like, how does a church combat that level of societal polarization on a Tuesday afternoon?
Through a very simple but very challenging framework. Host, befriend, stay.
Host, befriend, stay. Okay, unpack that.
Sure. It's not about running massive, flashy, attractional events to get a huge crowd. You host spaces of warmth, like opening your home for a neighborhood worship and prayer night or a simple dimmer.
Right, inviting people in.
Then you befriend the lonely, the stranger, the person who doesn't look or vote like you. And crucially, you stay.
Ah, you stay.
Yes.
So when the relationship gets messy or awkward or inconvenient, you don't abandon it. You don't retreat back to the safety of your proverbial farm.
Precisely. That is how a church becomes a lived-in community that people can actually enter and experience. God did not remain distant in the pristine safety of heaven in Christ. He became a costly presence among us. He moved into our ruined city.
And now, as his apprentices, we're called to do the exact same thing for others. Which naturally leads us to action, which ties into the 5th and final Bible study question. We've looked at what the text says about God, about humanity, what we need to obey, and the examples we need to follow. But the final question we always have to ask is, who can I talk with or pray for in light of what I've learned today?
And we want to pose that directly to you listening right now.
Look around your life this week. Who in your neighborhood, your workplace, or your extended family is feeling the ache of isolation? Who is carrying a heavy burden alone?
Because when you partner with a local school to support exhausted teachers and overwhelmed parents, That is the sound of joy heard far away.
Yes. When you invite the neighbor who just went through a divorce over for coffee and you just sit and listen to them, that is costly
Yeah.
presence. It's taking this ancient blueprint of community and building it in your actual zip code.
This has been such a rich discussion. If you want to explore more of these beliefs or if you are looking for practical tools for the journey to help you live out this apprenticeship in your daily life, we highly encourage you to visit the church's website at www.agapechurch.life.
Yeah, there is a wealth of resources there to help you take your next steps and go dupper. And honestly, we truly want to thank you for making the time to participate in this deep dive with us today.
We really do. We know your time is valuable.
Yeah, and we are so appreciative that you choose to spend it engaging with Scripture and seeking to grow. You are a deeply valued part of this learning community, whether you've been following Jesus for decades or you're just starting to explore what faith even looks like.
Absolutely.
And as you head into your apprenticeship groups this week, we want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to mull over. We've talked a lot today about physical walls, physical neighborhoods, and physically moving into spaces.
Right.
But think for a second about the digital walls we build today. We spend so much time curating perfectly manicured social media feeds, our own pristine digital Jerusalems, but so often we live completely alone inside them, projecting a life that isn't real.
Yeah.
So what if the costly presence you need to practice this week requires logging off, stepping outside your curated digital bubble, and simply knocking on a neighbor's door to bring the sound of God's joy into the real world?